In this video, we're going to demonstrate how to use Microsoft Excel to carry out a paired samples t-test. On the right-hand side, what we see here are the four fundamental equations that we'll have to use to carry out our paired samples t-test. And on the left-hand side, we have our raw data for eight fictional research participants, and each participant was measured twice in what we call a pre-test, and then following some type of intervention or an interval period, a post-test measure was obtained from each of the eight participants. And where we want to start here is by first calculating our descriptive statistics. And so I'm just going to put a label here in cell A10, and first thing I want to calculate is the sample size, and I'm just going to give that a label. And I'm going to click this cell, and I'm going to issue the Excel command for sample size, and I'm going to hit equal, and I'm going to type in the Excel command count, where Excel is going to count a number of cells that I highlight, and I'm going to shift 9 for the open parenthesis, and I'm just going to use my mouse to click and highlight the array of cells over which I want to calculate the sample size. I then shift 0 to close the parenthesis, and I hit enter. So we have a sample size of 8. Notice here I highlighted and calculated the count for an array of cells for the data and not the participant identifiers. And so we don't want to use those to calculate the sample size. We want to use the array of the actual data. The next descriptive statistic is the mean across the pre-test scores and the post-test scores. So I'm going to hit the equal sign, and I'm going to type in the Excel command average. I shift 9, and once again I'm going to highlight the cells over which I want to calculate the average. I shift 0, close, and we have an average measurement of 19.875 units on the pre-test across all 8 participants. Now, to do that for the post-test, I just need to click on the cell where I just calculated that average. I move my cursor over to the bottom right hand corner until it becomes a plus sign, and I'm going to click and hold the left mouse button, pull that over, and automatically the same command moves over to advance to column C. The next step is I want to calculate the standard deviation for across each of the pre-test and post-test scores. So I'm just going to use the abbreviation SD. I'm going to hit the equal sign, and I'm going to type in the Excel command stdev.s, which is the standard deviation for a sample. I'm going to shift 9 to open parenthesis, and I highlight the array of cells, and I shift 0 and I hit enter, and we have the standard deviation for across the pretest. Once again, I'm going to grab that bottom right hand corner, pull it over, and we have the standard deviation, as you can see here in the formula bar, of the standard deviation.s for C2 through C9. One more statistic we need to calculate here that we're going to eventually need in our equations is the df, which is the degrees of freedom. And I'm going to calculate and put that value here. So I'm going to hit the equal. And the equation for the degree of freedom for the paired samples t-test is the sample size subtract 1, or n minus 1. We know our n is in cell B10, and I'm just going to hit the hyphen for the subtraction of a value of 1, and I hit enter. So our degrees of freedom is a 7. The next step is to begin setting up the additional values so we can start performing our calculations with our paired t-test equations. And the first thing to do is to calculate the difference between the pretest and post-test. I'm going to skip one column, and in column E, I'm going to put a heading of difference, and this difference will be the pretest subtract the post-test. In column F, I'm going to type in difference. I'm going to put the number 2 here, and then I'm going to highlight F1. I'm going to go up to my formula bar. I'm going to use my mouse just to highlight the number 2. I'm going to go to the bottom right hand corner of the font menu, and I'm going to superscript that, and I hit OK. And I'm just going to widen out this column here so I can see the difference squared. So to calculate the difference between the pretest and post-test, I'm going to type in an equation, and I want this difference to appear in this cell. So I hit the equal sign, I click on the value, or rather the cell that has the first value, which is the pretest, so it's B2, I hyphen, which is a subtraction of C2, and I hit enter. So we have a difference of positive 2, suggesting that there was a decrease across the pretest and post-test scores. As we've done before, I'm going to highlight this cell. I'm going to move my cursor over to the bottom right hand corner, click the left mouse button, hold it down, and pull it down over the array of cells. And so we see a difference between the pretest and post-test calculated for each of our 8 participants. The next step is to square each of these values. So I'm going to put that value in this first cell, so I'm going to hit the equal sign, and I want to square the difference score which is contained in E2 for participant number 1. So it's E2 shift 6, which is the symbol for raising something to some power, and that power is 2. And I hit enter. I highlight this cell, and once again I grab the bottom right hand corner of the cell, hold that left mouse button down, and I pull down over the array of cells that I wish to calculate. The next step is that we have to add up all the values in each column separately. So I'm just going to put a label here, and that's sum, and that value will appear in this cell. So I'm going to hit the equal sign, and I'm going to type in the command SUM shift 9, and I'm going to grab the cells over which I wish to calculate the sum, which is adding up all of these numbers. I then shift 0 and I hit enter. Now, one has to be careful with Microsoft Excel, because what you see over here is that Excel is preempting our calculation by computing this value right here, and we don't want to do that. So I'm just going to delete that value, and I want to add up all of these scores in this column separately. So I'm going to highlight this column, or this cell, which contains the Excel command for sum. I'm going to grab the bottom right hand corner and pull it over, and when we highlight this cell, we can read in the formula bar that this cell has a value generated from summing F2 to F9. So this ends our first part of our demonstration of using Microsoft Excel to perform a paired samples t-test.